All right, we're live. I am back. I am live streaming. Who am I? For anybody tuning in for the first time, I'm Joshua Kemble. I've been a freelance illustrator and graphic designer for about 20 years. I've been a professional art director going on, I can't remember if it's like 7 years. It's been a while. And that's what I do for my day job. And when I'm not doing that, I work on independent graphic novels and comic books, kind of like carrying on a long tradition of underground indie comics. And I tend to write autobiographical slice of life. And I'm currently working on a historical fiction graphic novel about Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Robert Browning. And I do these live streams while I'm working on comics. And so, like, for a while, I was doing these live streams and working on two stories. Book two, which is the sequel to my autobiographical comic that you can pick up on Amazon right now. And it's actually a pretty good book. I'm very proud of it. It's about my journey dealing with depression and caregiving for somebody with panic disorder. And it starts getting into the complexities of like the childhoods that we all kind of carry along with us as adults. Childhood doing silly things like dressing like Indiana Jones for an entire year before cosplay was actually a thing, as well as like trying to control playground politics and deal with some of the hypocrisy witnessed growing up in a Christian school. And so that's two stories, and you should pick that up. That's my first graphic novel, first published graphic novel. My second one came out like on the 7th, and that's Jacob's Apartment. And Jacob's Apartment is a enjoyable comic. Well, not none of my comics are super enjoyable. They aren't lighthearted. They're darker comics, but they explore really deep, important themes. Jacob's Apartment is a comic book that talks about the kinds of questions that can shake even the strongest of faith, and it deals with the lives of two 20-something roommates who both fall in love and start having interweaving dreams as they're both dealing with tremendous losses in their lives. Sarah is dealing with the loss of a relationship, and Jacob's dealing with the loss of his father to cancer. And it sort of goes into the complexities of losing a loved one to cancer, wrestling with deep questions of faith, as well as some pretty trippy dream sequences in which the main character kind of shows up as his own like stuffed animal that he had as a kid. And Sarah is constantly having dreams of being underwater and swimming and drowning. And this comic I'm really proud of, and I'll be doing signing at Barnes and Noble on this Saturday at the Palmdale Barnes and Noble in the good old SoCal, Southern California, on the far edges of Los Angeles County. So if you guys are from Southern California and you want to support indie books, show up to that event this Saturday. And I'm really hoping afterwards to hopefully do, if enough people show up, it'd be fun to maybe go to Bravery Brewing and do a little celebration of the fact that I finished this book and it got published. And yeah, it's out in the world. And Graphic Mundi, the publisher, did a really beautiful job printing it. Very proud of it. I debuted it at TCAF in Toronto this last weekend. And so now I'm just basically doing catch up. And that's what I'm going to be doing right now. So make sure you've ordered this. Ask your local bookstore to carry it. If you're local to Southern California, make sure you come to the signing. And basically, let's get into the actual stream. So on this stream, what I do is work on comics. I work on them I'm working on a book called Not Death But Love, which is the strange supernatural story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. And I am coloring page 19. And I had gotten pretty far into it on my stream today earlier, and then had to go do bedtime and book time with my son, which is like a must. And it's fun to do. I haven't, my wife and kid have been out of town for a couple weeks. And so I really missed being able to kind of hang out with my kid and read with him and pray with him and just like have, I don't know. It's just fun to have him around the house. He's a heck of a lot of fun. And we were literally about 20 minutes ago playing with magnets on a board that are like these little people magnets, and then like swapping out the heads of these characters and pretending that there were like weird pig people running around, and it was a lot of fun. And I missed that. So my son's 8 right now, and it's just like the funnest time ever, and definitely worth kind of stepping away from the comics for a little bit. But now let's get back in the zone. So over here is where I'll be working on the page. When I do streams, when I'm thumbnailing based on the script, it's usually the script is right down here. But since we're just coloring, it's just going to be colors over here. And I'll just talk and chat. And like, who knows what'll come up. On the last stream, we were literally talking about the best songs to karaoke to, which is funny. It turns out that like, one of the friends of the show, Paul Pate, who's also a really good cartoonist and illustrator, used to be like a bartender at a karaoke bar, and it led to this just hilarious conversation where everybody was talking about their favorite stuff to rock out to karaoke to. And it seems like the consensus, at least in my audience of people who read and support graphic novels, indie graphic novels, what a shock, is that none of us can sing karaoke well, but we all love doing it. So that was fun. That was a fun stream, and now I'm looking forward to another fun stream. Who knows who will show up? Again, it's like a Sunday night. It's 9:30, and my goal is, if you look on this page, everything that's magenta on here has not been colored yet. So what I need to do is flat the rest of this page, and we'll just kind of go from there. I also want the colors to match, so I'm probably going to find the previous page that had like a kind of similar building front, and you'll probably see like a little artifacting on the screen because StreamYard is insane. So that is what's going on. Now let's get into it. So I did a previous page that was set up in a kind of similar fashion, and it's basically got similar color. I also want to find one of the earlier pages that shows the exterior of the building. I think it's raining in one of the previous ones, but I want to steal some of the colors from there as well. But my goal when I'm like flatting, and I really recommend this for people when they're cartooning, it's good to be experimental and have fun with your color palettes and all sorts of things like that. But it's also extremely important to be consistent with your color palettes. And I think like sometimes people get so lost in the fact that they have the ability to use every color in the rainbow that they'll kind of forget to kind of simplify. And simplifying is a huge part of being successful at coloring. If it, as successful as you could be, I'm not saying I'm super successful, honestly. But yeah, so here we go. I'm going to basically go through and deselect this floor. And then we're just going to go through and try to flat this entire page. We flatted most of the panels on the last stream, and that was a lot of fun. And now it's just this big old crowd scene, and getting not a crowd scene, just the front. I don't know why I'm calling it a crowd scene. I think I need a little more coffee. But it's just mainly trying to get this carriage and the front of this building colored. And then the nice thing is, once I'm done with this, it's on to page 20, which in order to hit my deadline, I really need to finish like toward the beginning of the week, this coming week. And then we'll get back into roughs and thumbnails for the next section, and so on. So I'm really excited about doing a signing at Barnes & Noble. For me, even if like no one shows up, I'm trying to invite a lot of friends and family and stuff like that. I haven't really done that with signings in the past, but since this is at a big chain bookstore, I'd like to have at least some people show up. But I have done signings at stores and stuff like that before, and it's usually a mixed bag. If you guys have been watching like my videos about TCAF, I went to Toronto Comics and Arts Festival, and it was an incredible show. But I also did a very long vlog that I think is really helpful. That I can't remember the exact title of what I called it, but I think it was something about thoughts on conventioning. And I kind of got into some of the complexities of sort of like the weirdness of, we spend so much time as artists making this art we care about, and inevitably there's always a conflict and something strange about having to commodify, um, especially art and stories that you've done that you really love. There's just something very strange about being on like an auctioning block or like a speed dating round where you're trying to get people to fall in love with this thing you've dedicated years to. It's a strange thing. And store signings are no different than that. So, but I'm really excited about it. And regardless of how many people show up or how successful the signing is, it is a life goal of mine that's actually going to have been completed, which is I have forever wanted to have a graphic novel that's carried in big chain bookstores. And I finally have a graphic novel that is distributed and in theory should be available at pretty much any bookstore you can name. And so if you go to like your big box chain store or your local indie store and they aren't carrying Jacob's Apartment, they can. And that's kind of a huge thing. At least for me, it felt like a really big accomplishment. And so, like, the neat thing about doing a signing at a Barnes and Noble, however you feel about a Barnes and Noble, for me, it's a really exciting thing because of the fact that it's kind of a life goal that I can kind of cross off the list, which is just to have a book that's distroed to the level where it can be carried at a big box chain store. And so, um, yeah, so it's like a nerdy thing, but for me, it's like a little bit of a life goal kind of crossed off the list. And I will ask actually anybody who like watches my channel, if you guys are out at a bookstore and you see Jacob's Apartment or you see it at your local comic shop, please take pictures of it, like send them to me. Because I would just get a real big kick out of seeing it in stores. I have yet to see that happen yet. Saturday might very well be my first day seeing like a big bookstore carrying my comic, but it's a really exciting thing, and I don't want it to lose excitement. That's another thing is like I know that when you do stuff in industry for a long time, it's very easy to get jaded or get used to things that used to seem like a magical or cool thing. Um, I had that happen a little bit with t-shirts, like where I made a living for a very long period of time making t-shirts for people. And I remember there were a couple specific t-shirt companies or retailers that I wanted to carry my t-shirts, and I achieved those goals. And it felt so magical the first time it happened. But it did get to a point where with t-shirts, it just got to a point where I even stopped buying t-shirts for a long time just because I was sort of over it. Like I had gone through it. I had gotten in some design annuals. I had been printed. I had been carried at like Urban Outfitters and like some bigger retail stores. I kind of made a name for myself in that industry. And so like things that I used to get really excited about didn't excite me as much. Um, and here's the thing. I guess my point is, I don't think that was right of me to have that attitude. Like what I should have done was try to keep that joy and excitement alive, because it is really cool having your art on a t-shirt that somebody buys, and it's really cool that there's people out there who want to wear your art and like you know display part of their identity, like with your art on it. And the last thing I would want to do is lose that kind of sense of magic with like particularly with comic books, because comic books are something I'm really passionate about. Graphic novels are like my favorite form of art. They're the reason I went to art school. Um, they're honestly like my passion and my love in art is all displayed through comics. And so I think that, like, to be honest, I don't know if that's something I could get jaded about or like lose love for, because I really sincerely think it's like my favorite thing in the world. Comic books are like one of my favorite things on the planet anyway. And so, like, just to me, again, like, I don't want to lose that sense of magic for the cool opportunities that I've been given lately, particularly like being able to go to a really cool convention, being able to meet people in another country that like are fans of my work. I just think these are really cool things, and like again, I don't want to I don't want to become a person who like would take advantage or not appreciate those things for what they are. Um, and similarly, I really do need to remember, especially going through a store signing where it can be a real, roller coaster of emotion. And for anybody curious about what I'm referring to there, again, you can kind of watch the video I did about showing at conventions and kind of the complexity of, again, like just commodifying these things we've like poured our hearts into, and how it can be kind of like this mixed bag of emotion. Well, it's very similar with store signings, but again, like I don't want to lose that appreciation for the fact that it is so amazing and cool that a retail store would do that, that they would take the time to set something like that up. And it's really cool if like one person comes, it's cool that they spent their day and took their time to do something cool to kind of like check out artwork that I really cared about. And much less like if they buy a book or they read the book, it's just such a gift and a cool thing that you can get really into something and someone else can possibly share that love with you that you poured into, your artwork and stuff. So I'm rambling, but that's kind of one of the things that's on my mind is just how cool and kind of amazing Saturday will be, regardless of how it comes out. Like if it's a bomb and like no one shows up and I end up sitting in a store for 5 hours, I still have won in a weird way because it's a huge life goal that I've achieved just by like being able to have a book in that store. And so, yeah, that's me rambling, but I'm also doing the colors for this sidewalk. And I also am in a weird position today where my editor, the cool person, Kendra, she's really rad. She's the editor at Graphic Mundi. She wants me to like read through a comic and give my opinion to her. So I have to do that tonight too. But again, like what a good problem to have. Like how fun it is it to to have like an editor ask for your opinion on a book, right? Like that's kind of a cool thing. And just like again, I don't want that to be something I wouldn't appreciate or like, I don't know. I think especially at my age in art and in comics, I come across a lot of people who've been in industry for a while, and it's just like they're burnt, they're done, like their passion is dead for it, or like they just have lost all appreciation for it. And so even if they're in it, like they just are kind of like a shell of what they used to be, and I don't want to become that. So that's a thing. Obviously there's a certain amount of jadedness that is going to happen when you're in an industry for a long time. Like I definitely I've been doing professional art for a long time, so like there are definitely some things that were I like completely green to the field, I would be like super ecstatic about. And now I'm just kind of like, yeah, that's just kind of how it goes. Um, but all that being said, again, like there's no reason not to have like excitement or passion for things, because at the end of the day, like life is very short and we should be kind of like passionate and enjoying the things that we have, because they can be taken away. And yeah, so that's it's kind of a ramble, but who knows. So I'm hoping to kind of color all of these soon and then be able to get to reading that book. But right now we're doing the sidewalk colors, and then we'll kind of go from there and see how far we can get. This carriage was kind of a beast to draw, and yeah, horses are never really easy to pull off. I always feel like I'm probably better off to not do too much detail on a horse, because if I go a little too far, it's going to look very strange. Um, and much less like doing a carriage in this case where like it was not a single horse carriage, but it's like a carriage with a couple horses. It's I don't know. I'm kind of best off like doing the best I can and keeping really minimal detail on there. So I don't reveal too much like my inability to draw a horse. Um, and also, photo reference really helps as well. So it's a good way to get around the inability to draw a horse. Look at a horse, it'll help you draw it. Okay, so we've got our guy here. And I'm just trying to pull whatever colors I can from this original. I think we've got like to do a little bit of white on the outsides. And then if you guys are tuning in, I hope you guys are having a creative night and getting a lot of work done on your own creative projects. There's a lot of really talented cartoonists that listen to the show and work on their own stuff, like when they're, listening to me. One of them actually stopped by the booth. There were a couple that stopped by the booth and wanted me to mention them by name on the show. But there was one guy who he didn't really want to be mentioned by name, that just has listened to, my podcasts and shows since like back when I was doing a show called Big Illustration Party Time. And he was telling me that he just really likes having this on in the background when he's working, because it just kind of keeps him company. And I've definitely been in that scenario where there's specific shows that I listen to a lot that I really appreciate, that I don't really comment a ton or talk to like the creators. When I'm listening to it, I'm just kind of have it in the background and I really admire it and love it. But it's like that wonderful background stuff for when you're working on art. And I think that's just exciting. Like if I am doing that for you and like providing you with like some background noise or conversation or just some thoughts while you're working on your stuff, that's another thing that I wouldn't want to get jaded about. Like that's very cool, and I'm glad to keep you company while you're working on your stuff. Especially, I've talked about this before, but it's like, cartooning is a very like isolated experience. Even when you're, living with other people or something like that, it's like often when you're cartooning, you're going to be just kind of like it's you and the page, and it's you and the page like super till like super late at night. And I love doing these streams because it's just like a nice way to not be alone while working on these things. It's just opened up so much enjoyment in that area, because frankly, it's just a very lonely process. So I just appreciate the company and stuff like that too. So I'm rambling about that. So I want to do these, I'm going to try to get the majority of this building first. And once we've got the building kind of blocked in with color, then we'll kind of work in and get this horse-drawn carriage that's in the foreground, as well as the cab driver. I think part of why I want to get this all done first is that I have to pull a lot of these colors from previous pages so that I'm being kind of consistent with the color of the building. But then when it gets to the horse, it's like I haven't had to draw the horse before. So it opens up like the possibilities to do some really fun stuff. I do want to see what's going on here. Okay, so we've got some stuff. Okay, so I think that this side part here is going to be white as well, but let's see what we can do. Okay, I think I'm going to do this color now. And I'm going to figure out, this will be the top. Okay, cool. So I think this will be the top color over here. What's going on? And this is going to be this space. everything underneath this will be that cream. So yeah, I feel like I don't know if you guys have had that experience, but I definitely have experienced that with illustration, where you'll meet like kind of older illustrators, and the ones that seem to like be very full of joy about what they're doing have somehow retained that sort of sense of wonder about the thing they get to do for a career. Um, and then you definitely come across veterans that are just done, like and again, like, a lot of them very talented artists, but it's like there's just a difference in the energy and the honestly, like I think it even affects their health, like I think that a bad job outlook can just really screw with your with your life, so yeah. So anyhow, here we go. And I'm starting to think that has something to do with it. I've been going on and on about that on my blog too, or vlog, or whatever you want to call it. I call it a vlogging sometimes, because like my friend Kevin Cross and I used to joke that there's a persona that we made up, and we used to joke about in the car when we used to work at the same place, and we'd be commuting to work, and we'd do these like bits as Kenny Vloggins, the vlogger. Um, and so I've been calling these my vloggins because of that, like the vlogs that I record when I'm on my commute. But on those vlogs, I've been talking about kind of like an abundance mindset. It's something that's been on my mind a lot lately. And I don't want to like belabor it too much on this channel. I don't want this to be like some strange like self-help channel where all I talk about is like abundance mindsets. But it's been on my mind a lot. Partially like some of the stuff I'm talking about here ties into that as well, where it's like I've just noticed a gap in my own life where I will often have more than I realize or acknowledge, and then I'll look at the things I don't have and get kind of upset, rather than just being thankful for the things I do have. And like looking at things from the standpoint of like abundance rather than scarcity. And then I was thinking about just life in general, and like a lot of problems in life that seem to be caused by people who are sort of living life as if we're on like a lifeboat, and we're all scrambling and having to like scrap for resources. And it's just like a I don't know, it's been on my mind a lot just to think that like, you know, um just approaching life from like a standpoint of thankfulness is like not always the easiest thing to do, but I think it's a much better like for me, just thinking about my two kind of modes. um I am much happier when I approach life from that standpoint of like, looking at the things I do have and kind of like appreciating them, and also like trying to kind of act as though I am coming from abundance, because I am. Like I'm blessed with a lot of things, and not just physical things, but like mental things, like physical abilities. There's just a lot of things that, without thinking about it, like I'm really fortunate to have. And like I've been finding that I'm much happier when I pay attention to those things and don't just ignore them. Um, and that's been helping me a lot. But I think that relates a little bit to what I was talking about too, where, you know, just realizing how fortunate you are to do creative work. Like if you are lucky enough to get paid to do creative work, um, that's a gift. Like that's a really cool thing to be able to do. And some people are having to like lay brick and like work really rough jobs, and like I'm not saying art is an easy job, but it's like it's a pretty cool job. Like I'd rather do that than lay brick. That's not to demean anyone who does like bricklaying. Maybe some people actually enjoy that, maybe even more than they would creative. But it's like, just realizing like the um the fortune there. I don't know if that makes sense. So maybe I'm just becoming like a big old hippie as I get older. Who knows? So that's all stuff that's been on my mind as I'm like, okay, coloring the cream here of the building. And we're kind of getting closer to getting the building here done. And I feel like once I get this done, that'll be a good thing. So it's funny, on the last live stream, I was kind of joking. We were talking about karaoke. And just as a joke, I was like, hey, I'm not going to sing unless people like do a super chat. And like people actually super chatted. So there was some musical numbers on our previous, because we were talking about karaoke. And so if you guys are curious to hear me belt stuff that was being typed out in the chats, you should definitely listen to the last stream. It was pretty goofy. But anyhow, so I'm always curious like what you guys are working on. And if you guys are working on anything interesting, let me know in the chats. Can even shout it out. Let's see here. So we've got ourselves a carriage in front of 50 Wimple Street, which is the building that the Barretts lived in. And we're at the scene where Elizabeth is sneaking out with her maid Wilson in order to kind of elope in a very last minute marriage to Robert Browning, who is sort of she's fallen in love with mostly through letters, exchanged initially because they were peers in the poetry world. And I believe Robert at this point is kind of a young, ambitious poet who's starting to get some press. And Elizabeth, I believe, has already established herself and published quite a few works, and starts writing to Robert because they admire each other's writing. And then they kind of fall in love. And it's like this very sweet story. And most people, when they write about the Brownings, that's the story they focus on. In this comic, the majority of the well-trotted territory about the Brownings is covered in about the first 20 pages. And then we get into the real fun stuff, which I'm pretty excited about. Jimmy in the chat said, any advice on writing a script for a graphic novel? That's a good question. Jimmy, would it be a script for your own graphic novel or a script for somebody else to work from? Because the advice would be kind of similar, but that would kind of color the advice that I would give. Like, would it be for your own work or for someone else? Just let me know. I mean, in general, without knowing those specifics, I would say that a good rule of thumb, whether you're writing for yourself or for another person, is that about a page of writing usually equates to like 4 to 5 pages of comics at minimum. So that's a huge part for comics. Oh, he said for his own. So that's a huge part of comics, is like really understand that like a lot of like a little bit of writing goes a really long way. I would give the suggestion to treat it like a script, and treat it with the same respect and dignity that you would treat, like for me, a big enlightening moment for me was realizing that I should probably go about the process that I did in college with like an essay. Like when I was in college and I had to write an essay, I'd have somebody else look it over. I'd do edits, I'd do rough drafts. I'd like basically like treat it like a professional paper because it was going to be graded. And so I'd have like friends I relied on like read through it, give feedback. If the teacher gave feedback, I'd like revise it. And like, I do all the process that we learn to do when we write, when we learn how to write. And for some reason there was this thing for a while where I just thought, well, comics will be different. And I think that actually that's a mistake. If you treat comics different in that way. Um, so I would say like treat your writing really well. Um, Respect your writing enough to have like another pair of eyes, especially editors or people you trust, give you feedback on it. Before you get into the writing, I would say outline like a storyline, like a plot synopsis. Like you need to actually know what point A, B, C, and D are right before you go and write your whole script. Don't just blindly start writing with no objective, but like I would think like, okay, am I writing a hero's journey storyline? Like generally most stories I've done are structured around a hero's journey arc, even for slice of life stories. And your plot structure doesn't have to be super transparent, but I would recommend like have a plot structure, and know what the main acts of your plot are going to be, and have a really good answer as to why. Because some people will write and they'll kind of write too much or too much filler or interesting stuff that doesn't quite fit the plot, because they aren't even aware of the plot they're writing. And so I would say like plot is key. Know where you're heading before you start writing, and then have your characters and your arc like all kind of laid out, and then from there you can start writing. And that's going to help a lot, especially when it comes to the editing phase, because once you're done writing your rough draft, you can kind of compare your draft to your story arc, and you can be like, is this moving the story along the plot? Are my characters developing? Are they having growth? Does this make sense to have in here, or is this just filler? And it'll help you be less precious and make really helpful decisions. Because as a writer, sometimes you'll write something you're really in love with, that is actually pretty cool, and maybe it's like a joke or a filler or like just a little character moment because you fall in love with your own characters for sure as you're doing the writing. And I would say like having that arc or that plot is really helpful to help you not get so blinded by your own bias for your characters that you include a bunch of stuff that really doesn't need to be in the script, or you include a bunch of stuff that like isn't furthering the story at all, and like anybody but the writer who reads it is just going to be like, why am I like, reading this thing? I don't know if that's helpful, but yeah, like, so structure it, write it out. I'd say write it, to me, I actually like writing it as a script. And then once the script is finished, I go through multiple drafts of it. I give it to, two or three people that I really trust. These aren't the kind of people that you show your work to and they're like, that's beautiful. These are the type of people you show your work to and they're like, oh, you used the wrong tense here. Or like, why would so and so do this? That doesn't very much fit their character, right? Or why is this character in here? Like, how are they furthering the story? Or actually, like, I really got some valuable feedback with Two Stories Book Two's script, where my initial pass at it at first didn't pass the Bechdel test. And I really want to be cognizant to pass that test as a male writer. I don't want to just be writing female characters that are only there to kind of further the plot. I also want to have female characters that are important on their own, and like have depth and stuff like that to them. So give it to people you admire, treat it with respect. um, I think the beginning is really, it again, just always think about it as your plot structure is your guide. And that's going to help you when you sit down to write too, because you'll be like, okay, I'm on my hero's journey arc. Right now we're doing rising action. And then as you're writing the rising action, you can be like, okay, this isn't really rising action, or oh, this isn't really heading toward like a climax. And it's like, if you're like at a point where it's like a little bit before the climax in the story, then you'll be like, oh crap, I gotta up the ante a little bit here and move the story along, right? Showing up is a good thing. Like a lot of people have an idea for a script and they don't want to show up and like work on it daily, and like that's a huge thing. But also realize, like, for a graphic novel that might take you very well 5 years, that could be like a 40 to 50 page script. And so that's a really big thing to keep in mind, is like, you don't have to write War and Peace. Your script is going to be pretty succinct. If you have a 20-page script, you're talking about like an 80-page comic at that point. And so like that's another thing. From there though, like another thing to remember with scripts is your script is never really a comic book script until it's thumbnailed out. And so thumbnails would be good too. Because once you start blocking out thumbnails of your work, then you start seeing the visual storytelling and seeing what works and what doesn't. And when you're writing it yourself, there's a huge advantage, which is like, I mean, the nice thing is, when you're working with a writer, you'll often come across something that like sounded good on paper, but it's not going to translate well to sequential work. When you're working on your own comic, you can just be like, that doesn't work. I'm changing the script like on the ground so that it works. But another thing, if you're writing the comic for yourself, and this is something like Gary Hodges talks about a lot too, I guess he does the same thing, is I will separate myself into my writer self and my artist self. And so my writer self is never nice to my artist self. Like I always end up deciding that I need to do things that are really hard to draw. Like I'm not often thinking of the fun it's going to be to draw. I'm often thinking what is necessary for the story, and that actually pushes me to have to do art that is not super fun to do all the time. Sometimes I have to draw crazy crowd scenes that I, otherwise wouldn't choose to do. But that is a key thing when you're writing for your own art, because otherwise you're just going to draw a bunch of talking heads. Um, if you like drawing people, then everything you do is just going to be talking heads and people, and never have like complicated environments or anything like that. And so never take it easy on yourself as a writer. Like if you're a writer, definitely give yourself some fun stuff. Like, since you're writing it, set it somewhere, that's like somewhere you might want to draw, that kind of thing. But don't take advantage of yourself as a writer. Write the story you want to write. Don't at any point go, oh, that's going to be hard to draw, so I'm going to change the script. Don't do that to yourself at all, because then you'll shortchange yourself when it comes to the art. The downside is if you take that approach, then the art part of you is going to be like cursing yourself later on, because you'll be like, yeah, I mean, this works for the story, but now I have to draw a giant crowd scene. So yeah, so those are just some basic tips of advice. If you had more specifics you wanted to know, let me know, but hopefully that was kind of helpful. I would just say, like, for me, the big one that cracked open me making better comics was the realization that for years I had been writing comics, almost treating them differently than I would if somebody just hired me to write a script and it was just going to be judged on the prose alone. And I actually think that's the wrong approach. I really do think if you treat your comics with the dignity and respect that you would treat like a paper that you'd be writing for school, and you really go through it, you do your drafts, you treat it like a professional. What's weird is you end up with like really professional work. and professional scripts. So yeah, that's basically my advice. Gary said he's just popping in. Gary's actually really incredible at writing scripts for his own stuff too. So I don't know if he has anything else to chime in. Gary, did I miss anything on that? I even mentioned that Gary, you use a similar method to me with the whole like being a hard writer for yourself. Like as an artist, you sometimes are like, oh, writer Gary is so annoying because he made me draw this really hard thing. But I think that separation is really important. Yeah. So, and then Jimmy said, thanks. I'm trying to remember what other helpful tools, like a spider web, I think. Yeah, I mean, I think like the key thing is just like structure. It's like anything else, like with comics too. It's like the better your structure, the more it's going to be feasible to actually get it done. Whereas when you try for like structureless creation, it can just be like, it can be like a prison of your own making, you know, which is kind of a weird way to put it, but I guess that's just creating, you know. The other thing is don't be too precious. I guess that would be another piece of advice for writing. If you're too precious with your work can really suffer. There's a lot of people who really fall in love with an idea and then end up kind of binding themselves to like the initial idea that they fell in love with, when really if they just made like 2 or 3 like minor changes, like they'd have much stronger work. So that's another thing, is like as hard as it is, because that's our little crazy chihuahua that's barking. He's a cutie though. He's a really cute dog. But yeah, I think like not being too precious, not falling so much in love with your story that you're unable to see clearly or see from other people's perspectives like what needs to be improved. These are all really helpful things. So it's hard though, you know, it's like, I think the vague advice is always hard to give because again, I'm not sure like what specifically you might be struggling with like writing. And so sometimes it's a little easier to answer if it's like, hey, I keep hitting this specific wall with writing, like how can you kind of overcome that? Um, I you know, because I could also give advice on writing really personal things. Like it depends on the kind of stuff you're writing. A lot of people who write in the genre I write have a lot of trouble with authenticity and also like honestly just maintaining sanity when writing about really heavy topics. And there's tricks and tips and stuff that I could give on that as well. It just kind of depends on what and exactly the specifics are, you know, in your scenario. But thanks for the good question, Jimmy. That's a fun one to answer. For me, the big breaking one was just to treat it like professionally and realize that I know how to write and really approaching writing differently for comics. Oh, there are a few things. Okay, sorry, I almost forgot. Okay, in comics, every action has to be pretty much a panel. So just keep that in mind when you're writing. Like every time you change or have a new action, like a character picks up their shoes or something, and then they put on their shoes. So now we have 2 different actions that we have to show now. And like it, you know, what can seem like a simple sentence can be like an entire page of comics. And so that's really a big one. Gary said, I think you hit the highlights, and yes, I think there's little value in thinking too much about the drawing when you're writing. And I do think like the one thing you should be thinking about with the drawing is when you're ideating, like when you're initially coming up with the idea, picking settings that are going to be visually compelling for you is not a bad call. But I just would hate like if somebody picked a setting that would be visually compelling as the writer, and then as the artist kind of copped out and changed their own writing because they're like, well, that would be hard to draw. So instead of it being in New York, I'm going to set it in, you know, like this other place that's a lot easier to draw. Yeah. So those are just some tips, but Let me see. Other things like the action thing is huge in comics. Too heavy of dialogue is a mistake a lot of early writers in comics do. Now, keep in mind, you can have a lot of dialogue. Some of my favorite cartoonists have really dialogue heavy comics. I was mentioning Gary as a really good example of a strong writer who thinks a lot about writing in comics. And Gary will have like entire sequences that are like very long conversations. There's a lot of word bubbles, and that's not a bad thing. Just be cognizant of it and conscious of it when you pick it, because Gary's choice to do that is very conscious and thought out, and it works in his comics. I've seen a lot of new cartoonists go exactly the wrong route with that, where they'll have like a superhero action page and it's supposed to be this very action filled page, but like 90% of the page is just crammed full of text, or characters are having like way too long of conversations when like it's just not appropriate and like wouldn't really work in a story. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind, is like be conscious and make conscious decisions. And I think that might be the biggest piece of advice. And I wonder, I bet Gary's going to agree with me on this. But I think one of the main things that will put you ahead of like most scripts that cartoonists write is just have the secret weapon of being able to answer why. If you don't have an answer of why, or if your answer is just like because it's cool, then like you probably need to go back and think about like your intention, because writing with intention is huge. If you don't know why, if you can't answer why, or your answer why is just like because it's cool, that's a problem with comics. Like that's a problem in general with writers, but really, I mean, like you should be able to answer why and have a really valid and thoughtful reason for it. And if you don't like, or and you it shouldn't be something you're just generating last minute because you're like, oh, I need a reason here. It's like, no, no, no. You should have a why. Because like having a why, it's kind of like the difference between really strong illustrators and people who are just kind of like creating pictures. um, Strong illustrators usually have like a reason for every decision they've made in their art. And so like if you read a story about the three little pigs that's like illustrated by a really good illustrator, they're going to have a reason that they made the size of the brick house like the way they did, and they composed it the specific way they did, and the reason they drew the pigs in a specific way. And you can just see that in like a really competent illustrator, is that like they always have a why. They always have a reason, and like that's a really, that is like a game changing ability for artists, and something that I wish I had kind of picked up on earlier. Because once you get it, you know, when you hear that at first and you're in art school, you want to be able to like early in art school. I remember having illustration teachers that were teaching that concept of being able to answer why. And it used to just drive me nuts because I'd be like, why can't I just say because it's cool? You know, like that used to drive me mad because I'd just be like, well, what if I did want to draw it just because it's cool? Why does it need like some deeper meaning? But then once it clicks and you actually understand that, like it furthers the work to have like kind of a reason and an intention behind everything. It actually like really, really strengthens your art, and it helps you to better make decisions, like conscious decisions, so that you can be like, okay, I'm going to have this typeface huge because I'm trying to say that this person is, you know, maybe I have a character that's feeling really small, so I make the type around them like huge just to like make them look extra small. I don't know. It's just something to kind of keep in mind. But like intention is a big one too, um, and one of those ones that once I started putting that into stories, and again, like you know, having your story structure, like having an arc, is really going to help with that too, because like then you're not then you're basically not you know, making arbitrary decisions, but you're like really aware that you're consciously moving the plot. And so that's going to help edit out all that stuff that doesn't have a why. So that's, I don't know. That's just some random advice, but I think it's very helpful. And then also, like, again, I can't really reiterate like how much other people that are very trusted in your life are going to like really play a key role in having strong writing. Um, and you want to find those people that are going to um, be encouraging, but also honest. You don't want to like just give it to the friend who's like going to tell you that everything's great, and meanwhile, like they know that it's not. Whew, we got through a little bit of this, and we're at the hour mark. Let's see. Philip just hopped in. How's it going, Philip? And then Gary said, also, I would suggest don't show your work before it's ready, but definitely share it. But be choosy about who you show it to. Look for people who read a lot and give smart notes, not just anyone. I agree with that too. A big warning sign for somebody not to show it to are people who are going to change the intent of your story. People who are going to change your story to get closer to your intention is good, but people who want to entirely just take over your story and make it their own are like not necessarily the writers that you want, like to the readers that you want. You want people who are actually going to help you get closer to your vision, and also people who will be candidly honest and tell you when something sucks or it doesn't fit or make sense. Yeah. Philip said that's a big one. Jimmy, great question. And now I'm going to play the trailer for Jacob's Apartment, which is my graphic novel that came out on the 7th, and it's done in the vein of Eternal Sunshine for the Spotless Mind and Ghost World. It's a doomed romance comic for ages 16 and up, and I'm going to play the trailer now, and then we're gonna hopefully finish coloring this carriage. So yeah, here we go, and there we go. I'll be right.
Clearly it seems that only in dreams can we these things we've seen and walk around breathing pain. I don't know the part to play in this heart of mine. There's dissonant things, they split at the seams.
All right, so I'm back, and Gary said, yeah, I think it came up in my last video somehow, but I feel like every single page needs to have some clear point to it. There needs to be at least one important idea, one development, or one reveal. Yeah, and then like in the case of something like this book where I'm working from, a collaborator's script, a lot of that is just getting clarification from the script and trying to get to the heart of the matter. And also, another thing is when you're translating your script or anyone else's script, another piece of advice, just coming from an artist perspective, is clarity is key. Like if you're unclear, which tends to be a problem with early comics, is like the last I want is a lack of clarity. If it's unclear what is happening, people are not going to really enjoy reading the comic, like no matter how abstract or cool or awesome the art is. At the end of the day, clarity is huge, and it pays off tenfold because I've had that method like to all of my work. And the one thing that I will proudly say is like I've never had somebody who was confused from reading my comics. Like, people tend to read my comics and get the intention and the meaning that I've put behind it. I've rarely had anybody reach out to me and ask a question about something in a story that I wrote. That was a comic that was like, gave me the response of like, wow, they didn't get it. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't bad readers out there. There's definitely bad readers. There's definitely going to be like some nuanced things that people might miss in my stories. But in general, like, I do really aim to tell like the clearest storytelling that I can, even if I'm going to get a little abstract and artsy with the art. At the end of the day, if I'm having an action happen, I want people to understand the action. If I want them to be confused about the action, they're going to be confused about the action. And that's something to kind of consider too. Because, like, part of the script writing process as a cartoonist is like going through and kind of making sure that you're visually conveying the thing that you've written out. And so, like, to me, if I'm conveying the emotion, that's the biggest question that I have when I'm conveying a script that I've written or that someone else has written. It's really like, am I showing and displaying the emotion of this scene? And is it clear? Like, can people read it? Can they tell what's happening? And that's a huge thing, especially for early cartoonists, because quite often we want to show off, and we want to show off that we have like these really immense capabilities, and show off like how well we can draw, and show off cool fight scenes and like, that kind of thing. But if you're drawing a fight scene and it's unclear that somebody's getting punched, and the whole point is that the person's getting punched, you've really like lost the forest for the trees there, right? So yeah. Let's see. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense or if that's all that clear. I don't know. Philip said, "Got your coffee refill?" Yes, I did. And I don't know why, but for some reason right now I'm having like a massive ache on my side. And so I'm hoping that I'll be able to kind of finish this this panel before I kind of go crash, because I definitely think I've been at this page like most of the day, and my goal is to like finish this by the end of the night. And I'm not sure why I'd be like having this like side ache, but it might be that I've had a little too much coffee. So we'll just kind of chill on the coffee and just kind of see if that solves that kind of issue. But that's a new one. So we're going through and just kind of isolating out all of these areas of this cream that I basically have in the background. I will say there's another big trick to writing too, which is just to write. Like, don't let your idea live in your head for too long. There's a lot of people who have this great idea that they want to do for comics, and then they never start. And one of the key things with comics is just to start. Like, even if it's a shorter story, I think like you're going to learn a lot more from the process of just doing it, and then like maybe doing it wrong, than you are from like kind of thinking about it and theorizing about it and like trying to learn as much as you can about it. I think that at the end of the day, like, most of us who've been doing comics got pretty good at it just by doing it. Like, that's the key, is like, so with the script, even in that case, like, the best thing you can do is start. And again, if you start with structure, you'll never blame yourself. Like, if you start with structure and you think like, what's my plot? And just break it down into basic things like, what is going to happen in this story? What's the main change that's going to happen to the characters? Because hopefully you're going to have some character change. Like, one of the most boring things in comics is when you have an unchanging character. Like, they start out as like a badass and then they end as a badass and there's no character growth. I think like part of the reason that Wolverine was such a, I'm just going to bring up a mainstream comic, but it's like the reason I think he was such a popular character in X-Men is he has a really clear kind of like growth arc that happens. So like Wolverine definitely like changes a lot in most scripts that deal with him as a character. I think that's one of the reasons he's really popular. Whereas quite often, like Cyclops, and if we're thinking like X-Men, is kind of the more boring X-Men because he doesn't tend to have a lot of growth or plot changes. And I know they've done different things with him, but at least in the Chris Claremont era of the X-Men, he didn't have as many challenges to his character and character growth as Wolverine. So of course people are going to be drawn to like Wolverine, who has this more kind of like complex storyline where he grows and changes and has some inner demons that he's wrestling with and has to kind of rectify. I think that like, if you're writing a story, even if it's slice of life, just having characters that grow and change and learn things is a really big thing for like a screenplay or a plot. So like even asking like how is this character different at the end of the story from where they were at the beginning is a really good thing. Even if the character goes from being confident to lost, it's still a change. And then Gary said, your storytelling is strong and clear and never feels strained or overwritten or artificial. Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't even have to like my books, but I do pride myself in the fact that like it it tends to be pretty clear like what is going on, who is talking. Um, and again, like I think a lot of early comics have that problem where you're like reading it. I'm sure we've all had that moment where you read like a comic that's done by like a first time cartoonist, and you're like, wait, is so and so talking? Like, wait, who's hitting who? Like, what is occurring here? And the more time you're losing doing that, like the more you lose the what is it called, um I'm blanking out on what it's called. It's like the illusion of disbelief or something. It's like I'm blanking out on what it's called, but the suspension of disbelief. So like suspension of disbelief is a huge thing in comics, and the second you make somebody stop and have to go, wait a minute, what is going on here? Um, there's one point in Jacob's apartment where I intentionally do that, and it's at the beginning where I split off two storylines on the first page, and you're supposed to have this moment of like at first reading it as one storyline and then being like, wait a second, what's going on? And then you see these little hints that it's two alternate storylines, but that also establishes a theme that goes throughout the story where you're going to be following these two different dreamers and two different characters. And so it's sort of establishing like a mood. And so it's an intentional unsettling at the very beginning of the story that really doesn't repeat. It's just like intended for like a little artistic nuance at the beginning. But, it's like once you're kind of through that, like there's not a lot of moments like that. If the whole book felt like that, I think nobody would want to read it. Let's see. Jimmy said, yeah, I've been trying to make mini comics just to make something and get used to it. And I guess finally write down my main idea. And Philip nailed it and was like, suspension? Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Gary made a really good point where he said he was saying Dan Eckes on one of his videos quoted Hemingway as saying writing is rewriting, and that the first draft is trash. And I agree with that too. And again, I think a lot of that just comes to like, just apply the things about writing, like you've learned about writing in elementary school and in high school and in junior high. All of those things, they apply to comics, right? So if you're writing an essay, you're not usually going to get an A for an essay that you write once, right? If you're writing an essay, you're going to write multiple drafts. You're going to bullet point it and figure out like what's your main argument, like what's going to be your thesis, what are going to be your supporting facts, and then what's your conclusion, right? Like that's how you write a good essay. If you try to write an essay without those things like as your structure, then like your essay ends up meandering all over the place and you're not going to get a good grade on your essay, right? I don't know why, but like for some reason, a lot of us, including myself, when we start comics, we just kind of throw all those rules out the window. And yet we know, from like school, that like structure helps you clearly write, and it helps you come up and articulate ideas. And comics are an essay, like it's a visual essay, so you need to know like what's your thesis, what, like that's a good thing too. Actually, this is probably one of the most fundamental things, is asking, what are you trying to say? Like, what are you trying to say with your comic? Like, that would be a good thing to be able to answer. And preferably have an answer that's not like huge and long. Like, are you trying to say life is beautiful? Are you trying to say life is hard? Are you trying to say being a hero is worth it? Um, I don't know, like whatever you're trying to say, like have a rough idea of what that is, because that's going to carry you too. All right, so we have now gotten to our carriage, and I want to do the carriage in a different color. So we're going to kind of work that out. So we'll start with this bowler cap. Whew, man, my stomach is feeling terrible, you guys. No idea what's going on there. It's not even really my stomach, it's just my side is aching. I feel like if I told Gary what it was, he'd be able to draw me a diagram. Because Gary is like the guy who deals with biomedical art for a living, um, doing like forensics science and stuff. If you guys haven't yet, you should be reading Dinosaurs versus Marsbots. It's probably one of the better examples I can think of out there for like strong story writing in comics. Like Gary is a really very proficient writer, and like I think like a lot of people could learn a lot about just the art of writing comics from checking out his stuff. So, Jimmy, if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to Gary's channel for sure. He talks a lot about and dissects like his kind of process of writing, and it's very, I think it would be very helpful, especially if you're just starting. But the fact that you're doing minis is a really good sign that you're probably going to get really good at it, because that's the biggest hurdle, and the biggest trick is just doing it. So congrats if you've already gotten over that hurdle. It probably will only be a matter of time before you really start writing very excellent comics. And all a first draft has to needs is core cool ideas. It doesn't have to be pretty. Yeah, exactly. Don't be precious, especially with a first draft, and don't be afraid to junk write. Right, like writing takes time, and then it speeds up. It's really kind of a fun. It's a fun part, and also realize like the more awesome your script, like the easier it'll be for you to do the crazy dedicated thing that is required of cartoonists. Like if you write a script you're kind of meh about, and then you make it into a comic, the whole time you're doing it, you're going to be plagued with self-doubt about the work, which is inevitably going to come anyway. But if the script is strong, then like when that self-doubt hits, you can be like, well, I do have a really good script here, which is really vital as well. So right now I'm flatting this fella. Start with him. It's always hard with these darker tones to kind of try to make intelligible art that'll be print worthy. but I think I'm going to get there. I want this to have the same tone as the kind of green hat. But Jimmy, I'm kind of eager to check out your mini comics. Have you put them online at all? So I think he's done. And I'm going to put on another thing just to kind of check out what's going on with my side real quick, because I got like some weird side pain that just hit in. So I will put on, sorry to do this, but I'm going to put on Jacob's Apartment again, the trailer. Or no, you know what? I'll put on the trailer for 2 stories. So here you go. And I'll be back. All right, still stretching it out. So give me like 2 more seconds. I think I figured it out. So here, I'm going to put on Jacob's and then I'll be right back.
Speak clearly, it seems that only in dreams can we be these things we've seen and walk around breathing things. I don't know the part to play in this heart of mine. There's dissonant things, they split at the seams.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm not sure what's going on. Like I had like some weird side pain and I'm guessing it's just something like I stretched a little bit, so that seemed to handle it. But I'm going to power through this last comic and I apologize, that doesn't usually happen. It's kind of a little strange, but that's what it is. um all right, so here we go. We're going to get through this page. Yeah, it's sort of like, I don't know if you guys have gotten like an intense like cramp, like it's like that but in my side, and it finally went away a little bit. So I think I can power through. Frank just joined in and said he was just editing a video. I think Captain Courage also jumped in. It's weird. He's like, "What, Captain Courage?" So how are you doing, man? I hope all is well. I'm really hoping I can finish this. And full disclosure, that pain on my side is like a weird thing. I'm not sure what it is. So Philip said, at this point in my life, I have constant aches and pains everywhere. You get used to them. Yeah, I know this one's a weird one where it's like, I think I've just been drawing all day and I literally haven't stretched. So that's what I did a little earlier, was like try to stretch and kind of take care of it. And hopefully that'll handle it. We'll have to see. Um, Adventures in cartooning, you guys, and being old. And Thomas was saying, yeah, random aches and pains are a sign of getting older. Yeah, for sure. For sure, we're not immortal. It's one of the reasons I was saying, like, I think it's really good to have like an abundance mindset, because even just having a functional body where you can work is like a blessing, you know? And so, like, it's one of those things where you'll never notice it until it's not there. And then you'll be like, why wasn't I thankful for this when it was here? You know? It's one of the reasons I think that's so important to have. Um, all right. So we got this going. Oh, so I'm kind of excited. I think we're going to finish this carriage. That is my goal tonight, is to finish this carriage. And I don't think it has to be like super complicated to finish. It's feasible. Frank said he's about to head to bed. He just wanted to drop in and say hi. Hello, Frank, and sleep well, dude. Trying to think of ways to get this a little more with a little more depth. I like that kind of deeper blue. I actually like the idea of this maybe being gold. Jimmy said he hasn't posted anything yet. Let's see what you're saying here. Hang on. I'll read it right after I'm done with the selection. Let's see. Yeah, I like that. Okay, he said, I haven't posted anything yet, just drew some panels for these one-page comics that you fold. Something quick to get started and currently cleaning it up to ink it. That's awesome. That's the way to do it. I like those foldable minis too. I think that's like a really good way to do it. It's like nice, simple. You can produce it. You know, it's not like rocket science to like put it together. I think that sounds like a really good starting point. So I'm going to go through here and kind of isolate out all the things that I want to have as this black. I think now I might start pulling some colors from the previously used colors. The downside of something like this carriage is going to be tempting to kind of leave the whole thing as like a single solid flat color, but I think that for this to really read, I need to actually get in there and kind of like individually color the different sections of it. This is kind of similar to the thing we were talking about with writing, where when you're coloring, you really want to go with the like quick and easy answer. Sometimes it works, but the majority of the time you just have to like get in there and like I could be done by just saying that that's done, but like I don't think it would have the same impact as if I go through and really take my time and color it the way I think it needs to be. Not always as fun, but it's like the end result often will really surprise you if you go those extra little miles. Sketchy Edits said, "Hey guys, hi Frank and Josh. How's it going, Sketchy Edits?" Thomas said, "I've been thinking about doing the same comic strips I tried to make about 30 years ago and never did anything with. Didn't realize how hard daily comic strips are to make. They really are. And then to make well is like a whole other thing, you know?" Whenever you try to do like daily comic strips too, it's like it really makes you look at like Calvin and Hobbes and just realize the genius of that comic. Because it's like, I mean, you know, imagine like having to do dailies like that. Just not as easy as it might otherwise seem. Turn off my guides. I don't want to see those. That's cool though. I'd love to hear, Thomas, what your daily strips are about. Is it a specific theme or character or setting? Kind of curious. I think the hardest part of comics when you start making them is realizing how hard it is to make comics. It's almost a shock to the system. Like I still very vividly remember the first time taking a serious crack at doing comics and feeling like really weirded out by like just how complicated they really are, you know? So here I don't mind leaving some of this as flat. I want to get in there with some details. So I'm going to do a little bit of this blue, differentiate some of these little spots. Like, I think I want to have this more clarified. I think I like that idea. And possibly this thing, which I think is like almost like a rudder. Thomas said they're just silly anthropomorphic characters, a little like Pearls Before Swine. Pearls Before Swine is amazing. My wife is actually a fan of that comic. Who's the artist? The Pearls Before Swine guy? Yeah. Anyhow, really good really good art. But yeah, the second, you know, I still remember like the second I really tried my first very serious attempts at comics, I was just like, oh my gosh, what have I like? Why did I think these? I think you inevitably are like very, I don't know. I used to be, I think I used to have this idea that I would do comics in a specific way. And then I did them and I realized like how hard it is to pull off anything in comics, you know? A very like weird field where it's close to impossible. Um, but that's like half the fun of it and the addiction of it because you never really are gonna fully be able to solve the riddle, you know, that is comics. Okay. We're gonna get through this, guys. One thing I want to do here. Okay. Gary said he's calling it a night. Have a good night, Gary. Thanks for chiming in on the writing conversations. Pretty fun. A good conversation as usual. And I do really look forward to us being able to have a deeper conversation about the death in comics, which we're going to try to have. And I think that's going to be really cool. And fascinating, honestly, because it's like it's a subject I think you and I both think about, but it'll be fun. Kai the Great in on Twitch just said, "You want to conversate about something random, personal experience." I don't know. What about personal experience did you want to talk about? And they want to talk about mushrooms. Okay. They said they took 5 grams of mushrooms and it changed their life. That's cool. I did some dumb drugs when I was younger. Not calling that dumb or anything like that. But when I was younger, you know, drug use was super interesting and I thought it would be something profound. I don't personally do it anymore, like drug stuff. Not opposed to it, not for it. Just kind of not my cup of tea, you know? And I tend to think people attach like way too much to things. Like weirdly enough, I think people attach like I enjoy drinking, you know, it's fun to do. But I think some people like really glorify like drinking to like this weird level where it's like it's just not that great. Like it's not bad. It's just I don't know, you know. Anyhow, Oh, he said it scared him, and he quit vaping and smoking, and now just trying to get high on life, hitting the gym. Well, good for you, Kai. That's awesome. It's good to hear. Yeah, I just tend to like I know a lot of artists and friends that like smoke weed and stuff and enjoy it, and I don't judge them. I don't really care, you know. Not that I don't care. It's just not really like a thing for me. For me, it's like I'm too busy trying to do art and stuff to like really mess with like too much else. But yeah, I feel like we have limited time here, so make something cool. That's what I think, you know. Okay, so we're getting these horses kind of done. And I'm excited about getting these horses done. Philip said he was taking a phone call. That's cool, man. Oh, Philip, how is Crocs and Socks coming along? For those of you who aren't following Philip, you should. Philip Chandler. You can find him on YouTube by looking for Philip Chandler Art. He's a very good artist and like pretty cool. Has a YouTube channel. Been doing live streams a little more often too. And he's going to be working on a kid's book that I think should be really cool. So I think worth following. So I may change the horse's color. But right now I'm pretty happy with the color for these horses. And I feel like if I get these details out of the way, it's going to be a lot easier to get all this harness stuff worked out. Because those I want to have like a variety of the grays that I've been using for the carriage so that it doesn't feel too out of place. Philip said, since I saw you in Toronto, I haven't had a moment to myself to work on it. And he said, between my trip to Montreal and work dumping hours on me again. I haven't had any time. It's been really frustrating. It sounds frustrating. Yeah, I have to say, since my trip to TCAF, it's been a bit busy, you know? So I relate to that because I even, this page that I'm working on took me a few days longer than I think it would have. But yeah, juggling life can be really complicated on top of like trying to make these things, you know? It's not an easy task. Okay. Our horse is getting there. That horse. Wonderful, wonderful horse going there. Like that for the hooves. I like the idea of okay. Now we're gonna get into the pulling the grays in there. Did we already deselect some of this? Feels like we did, but then it got reselected. Okay, let's get some of these colors from the carriage. So let's start with this one. Start with that color. It's actually pretty good for here. Kind of dig that. Very strange when you're coloring a horse bridle kind of thing, because I'm not really super familiar with what all these things are, you know? I'm sure it might end up having that same effect that, like, a car guy or whatever would have, where, like if somebody looks at this and they really know horses, they might just be like, what is this nonsense? Philip was saying he was telling a friend on the phone that his life doesn't feel like his own. I think that's the tough thing, is I don't think we are our own. Like, I think we are, like able to make conscious choices sometimes, but I think that quite often we're at the whims of other people. I think, don't say that to be like discouraging. I just think that's sort of life sometimes. It can be kind of freeing though to realize that too, because we're sort of like we have an ability to make choices and stuff like that, but it's like it is nice to know, I think, that like everything does not end and rest on on you, you know, like it's, I don't know if that makes sense, but because I think quite often we can feel a lot of pressure as if our entire existence is completely dependent on only us, and that we bear the sole responsibility for like every single thing in our own lives. And I do think it's good to have extreme responsibility, but I also think that can be a really heavy weight to bear for some people, especially people who, through circumstances outside of their control, have like things come up, you know? Um, and I mean, I definitely think like the idea of ownership and stuff like that is really good. I also think like people should not bear the weight of everything. Like I feel like we're carrying, quite a lot of us are carrying way too much already. Um, and I think sometimes it's kind of relieving to realize like, oh, we don't have to carry everything ourselves, you know, like we're relying on other people. And yeah, anyhow, that's me rambling. I don't know if that thought is of any use or interest to you, but it's something I think about. So we're going to do this for the kind of gold things on here, and then I'm going to kind of carry it over. So this is going to be like these rings, this thing, this bit, some of these kind of more complicated things. I'm going to feel pretty good if I can get this done, though, especially considering I was having that weird side pain thing. It would suck if, like, I know it's weird, but it's like, and I know we all have physical limitations and stuff, but one of the hardest things, like, this is where I don't envy, like, all the stuff Corey's had to go through recently. One of the hardest things in the world is, like, dealing with, like, a physical limitation that, that you really can't like overcome, you know, because it's like it just is. um, so I'm hoping I can be like Corey, because Corey's very excellent at just kind of overcoming those things. Um, whereas I tend to be like the person who, like, if I feel pain or something like that, like I'm instantly like, yep, okay, I'm done, you know. So if I can power through this, I feel like I've borrowed a little bit of the power of my friend here. Okay, I want to do one other thing here with the rich black. And I think I'm going to do a little bit more kind of shading behind the clatter. Nothing huge. I just want it to like stand out a little better. But I also don't want it to look like I'm just coloring underneath it. So I have to subtly carry that up. I actually think that worked. Some of this is too dark, so we're gonna brighten up now just a little bit. We are almost done with this page. I'm gonna lighten it up a little bit. Not too much. Philip said, I like the aged grittiness. Thank you. So we're going to do a little bit more on the red side. I think that works. All right, you guys. That's going to do it. There's one other thing I should do, which would be putting that on multiply. Okay, let's actually not yet. Let's actually move this down. Put this back to normal. Move this down. I'm going to move this down. I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to paste it. Cool. I'm going to move this down. And we are good to go. Let's see. Let's try that now. Yep. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for those of you who've tuned in and watched this live stream. It took about 2 hours, but we finished this page. I feel pretty good about it. I like this last panel a lot. Kind of feel like that's pretty cool, is all I'm saying. So, yeah. So anyhow, if you guys haven't, make sure you hit the subscribe, the bell. That way you get notifications when we're about to go live. If Kai, the guy who jumped in on Twitch, if you want to follow me, that would be cool. I don't have a ton of followers on Twitch yet. Most of my following is on YouTube, but I am trying to kind of grow my Twitch a little bit, even though like I barely have anybody watching me on Twitch. So if you haven't yet, hit follow and sub and all that fun stuff. Anyhow, thanks to everybody who has subscribed on my YouTube channel. I have noticed a subscriber count going up quite a bit. And I'm not sure why that is, but I really appreciate it. And I'm just excited to kind of be able to do my art and hang out with you guys and have fun and stuff. And we powered through it and finished this page. So with that all being said, I'm Joshua Kemble, and I appreciate you guys tuning in my stream, and I'll see you on the next live stream or vlog. And Philip, hang in there and try to make time. And if you can't, that's okay. I mean, that's just the way it goes with art. But you're a good dude, and it was fun meeting you in Canada. And hang in there. All right, I will see you guys on the next live stream. And yeah, bye.